It started with a flicker. Not in the lights, those had been glitching since the building's HVAC upgrade, but in the financial authorization queue. Marlene spotted it at 2:43 p.m., hidden 7 layers deep in the command structure like a hairline crack in a dam. It registered as a minor verification error tagged low priority. But Marlene had built that system from scratch. If it twitched, it meant something beneath was already breaking, and she spoke the language it screamed in. Panic. That was for folks without root access, or an off-site encrypted mirror drive labeled "Use when fools win." Instead, she reached for her mug-chipped ceramic, and older than half the staff, then lit a sandalwood candle from her brother's failed farmer's market stall. The flickering ceiling light buzzed like a dying wasp. Down the hall, someone reheated shrimp scampi. Again, her office was the former janitor's closet, wedged between a network hub and broken file cabinet. Outside, the fresh crop of HR coordinators floated by, clutching pastel water bottles and whispering about turning headcount into heartbeat metrics. Marlene didn't translate. These were the same people who once asked if Linux came in a gluten-free version. 21 years. That's how long she'd kept this Frankenstein of a system, humming, held together by caffeine instinct and 3 a.m. shell scripts written during corporate chaos. No photos, no awards. But when systems froze or emails vanished or checks bounced, the call was always "Get Marlene." She was assumed like drywall or gravity. But now, she was legacy infrastructure, a workflow bottleneck, or as freshly imported VP of culture. Bryce Emerson, armed with a degree in digital synergy and a LinkedIn following, called her a relic of analog thinking. She wasn't surprised. Since Bryce's arrival, she'd watched it unfold: senior engineers, retired procedures, replaced by rituals, interns tinkering with production. She noted it all, especially how the new cloud auth system hadn't passed one security audit, how VPN spikes hit every Thursday at 4:55 p.m., and how one director's login activity revealed more DoorDash than dashboards. She wasn't angry. She was prepared. By the way, fun fact, 97% of people never hit subscribe. Wild, huh? If you're into stories where quiet minds win, tap that button. Back to Marlene. She didn't raise her voice. That was never her style. But when COO Bryce Emerson, the human embodiment of a decaf latte, told her they were re-evaluating strategic alignment with digital-first values, she stood, walked to the file cabinet, and pulled out every architectural diagram she'd authored in 2 decades. Then she laid them across his glossy desk like a blackjack dealer with nothing left to lose. He blinked twice by the time she reached the load balancer schema. "I'm sure the new hires can figure it out," he said weakly. Marlene smiled. "I'm sure they'll try." Then she calmly returned to her desk, ran a few silent backup scripts, disconnected an invisible metrics relay, disabled Slack audit trails, and relabeled one key data node as deprecated API. Nothing major, nothing traceable, nothing they'd catch soon. She kept working, not to keep her job, but because the system was hers. The company ran on quiet code. She'd written critical paths held together with bash scripts, logic, and loyalty no one saw. No one said thank you, but when payroll cleared and lights stayed on, that was her thank you. At 6:08 p.m., an invite landed in her inbox: compliance conversation, mandatory, no topic, no context, and scheduled for 9 a.m. Monday on a Sunday evening. Marlene didn't flinch. She executed a final script revision on her off-site mirror node. Then she retrieved a matte black SSD from the locked drawer, tucked it into a bubble-padded envelope, and slid it quietly into her weathered leather satchel. No labels, just 21 years of decisions, dependencies, and deep-rooted defense mechanisms. They'd find out what it held when their dashboards dimmed. She'd already be sipping coffee. HR had changed since Bryce brought in Avery Lynn, a charisma consultant turned VP of People Ops who thought ransomware was a yoga pose. She hosted a culture sync in the break room, tossed out words like empathy scaffolding and behavior monetization. By the end, half the staff was wondering who'd be next. The other half refreshed LinkedIn. Marlene didn't attend. She watched from her second monitor. The security feed still ran from the last audit. She didn't trust HR or buzzwords or anyone who said grit without irony. By Wednesday, Avery had let go of 3 people. 1 for using Excel. Next came Russell from QA cut for insufficient cross-system fluidity, whatever that meant. Then it was Hugo in infrastructure. He was the only one left who still remembered where the physical server backups were actually stored. Apparently, that kind of knowledge was no longer strategic. The firings weren't clean. Marlene could tell each one left behind digital residue, stale logins, dormant SSH keys, orphaned access scripts. She swept them up like broken glass on linoleum quietly without ceremony. By Thursday, it was her turn. Subject line, pathway to transparency. Body, hi Marlene. Hope your week's going awesome. As part of our bold shift toward a more collaborative and agile tech culture, we're asking all senior staff to fully document their workflows, tool chains, and login credentials. This will help our new infrastructure pod proactively shadow your knowledge base. Let's make brilliance shareable. It was signed off with a bitmoji of Avery Lynn tossing cartoon confetti. Marlene stared at the screen for a full minute. Not out of shock, just quiet validation. They were staging a heist. She'd seen this before. Once in 2010, when corporate tried to outsource ops to a team in Flagstaff and accidentally triggered a hippie out flag. And again in 2016, when consultants promised that Microsoft Teams could replace 3 departments and half the help desk. She replied, "Understood. Documentation in progress. We'll submit by Friday." Then opened a terminal window. Step 1. Verify contingency folder encrypted mirrored salted, twice versioned hourly. Root scripts stored offline on an air-gapped drive named Argus. She moved like someone who'd done this before packing her parachute while the alarm light blinked. That night, she ran a targeted audit on Avery's credentials. The account? Lynn A. Admin had already pinged HR Files finance records, and oddly, a test probe on payroll. Avery once asked if Python was a snake joke, but now she was crawling through sensitive databases like a raccoon in the recycling bin. Marlene didn't panic. She documented. Not for them, for herself. A living autopsy, a user's manual for collapse. System override begins at watchdog.sh, requires dual-factor auth from no local cert signed pre-2021. Fail-safe triggers on heartbeat loss. She slept fine. If you're reading this, someone made a predictably bad decision. Marlene smiled not with joy, but with tired understanding. Let them call her difficult. Let them label her outdated or not culture-aligned. She'd always been alone in that server room. The only difference now was that someone noticed and mistook solitude for irrelevance. They didn't understand her. Not yet, but they would. The hallway outside the COO's office always smelled like reheated espresso and artificial sincerity. Marlene stood there for a full 5 minutes before knocking, partly to organize her thoughts, partly because she knew Bryce Emerson hated being disturbed during his 3 p.m. executive reflection block. She knocked anyway. "Come in," came the exasperated voice. Bryce didn't even look up from his phone. "Got a second?" she asked, holding a printed network audit, an old-school power move. The report listed every failed access attempt, including the unauthorized VPN probe from Avery's terminal. Redacted names, but the timestamps were loud. Bryce blinked up at her, eyes unfocused. "Marlene, I'm in the middle of..." She laid the audit down. "Avery's already compromised one of our finance modules. If she keeps experimenting, you won't just lose data. You'll lose regulatory clearance and clients. This isn't about resisting change. This is about protecting the company from sabotage, disguised as synergy." Bryce sighed and rubbed his temple like she'd handed him a crossword puzzle. "You've always been valuable, Marlene, but we've got to let new leadership try their way. Avery has a mandate. She's got the board's confidence." Marlene stared. Vision. The woman once confused Jason with a wellness drink. She knew that tone, the practiced neutrality, the corporate shrink wrap wrapped around cowardice. Bryce wasn't going to help. He wasn't even listening. His eyes drifted back to his phone, probably browsing a Slack thread titled, Vision Vibes. "Understood," she said. She didn't argue. She didn't even sigh. She walked back to her desk and began the real shutdown. Not of the system, of herself. The process was clean. Exactly 22 minutes later, a meeting invite hit her inbox. Subject compliance review? Immediate. No greeting, no signature. Just silence and a blinking cursor. Just a meeting link and a time. 10 minutes from now. Marlene didn't need more than that. She already knew the script. When she joined the video call, Avery Lynn was waiting smiling like a podcast host selling vulnerability, and beside her sat some HR figurehead with a laminated code of conduct booklet and the ethical flexibility of a traffic cone. "Hi, Marlene." Avery beamed. "Thanks so much for hopping on. We just wanted to check in about some emerging compliance and culture concerns. Nothing major, totally routine." Marlene said nothing. Avery forged ahead. "We've observed some patterns of information siloing, not quite aligned with our cultural evolution goals. If this story hit a nerve or reminded you of someone who kept the lights on without ever asking for credit, go ahead and subscribe. There's more to come, and trust me, the next story might just make your old manager spill their coffee. There's been feedback that you're not collaborating openly, that you've withheld key documentation, operated with a bit of a territorial mindset." Marlene raised an eyebrow, from whom Avery blinked. "Well, you know we can't share internal sources. But it's really about fostering an environment of flow, not friction. Flow." Marlene said, dry as sandpaper. "Right," Avery chuckled awkwardly. "And honestly, some of your methods are a little pre-cloud. And the overall vibe just doesn't match our emotional fluency model." Marlene turned off her camera. "A beat." Then Avery cleared her throat. "So we'll be initiating a transition effective immediately. You'll receive a generous severance package, and we'll need your desk cleared by end of day." And then she said it. "Clean your desk, sweetheart." Sweetheart. Like Marlene was a tired waitress at an all-night diner, not the reason the company still had stable databases and encrypted payroll. She didn't argue. She clicked Leave Meeting, logged out, unplugged her Ethernet cable, then opened her bottom drawer. Inside a hollowed-out copy of Unix Networking Basics was a matte black drive. Slim, unlabeled, root authenticator, the digital heartbeat of the entire Redline stack. No one else even knew it existed, let alone what it governed. She tucked it into her leather satchel like lip balm, grabbed her stoneware mug, took her sandalwood candle, and walked out. No speeches, no escort, just the sound of her boots against tile. As the elevator doors closed, Marlene glanced up at the security camera and smirked. Let them reset the passwords. They just fired the final keeper of the vault, and now they were standing in the graveyard, figuratively. Marlene didn't go home. She hadn't had much of one in years, just a downtown rental where the heater clicked like it had arthritis and the air smelled faintly of cardboard and forgotten takeout. She checked into a roadside motel off I-84, one of those places with buzzing light signs, vending machines full of expired soda and sheets tattooed with cigarette burns. She signed in under a name she hadn't used since 2005, Irene Locke. That was the name on the first architecture file she ever committed, fitting in a full circle kind of way. She locked the door latched, the chain drew the curtains tight, kicked off her boots, lit the sandalwood candle she'd taken from her desk, her own quiet ritual. Then she pulled the old ThinkPad from her go bag. Its matte casing was worn smooth. A machine saved for a special kind of emergency, the kind that smelled like scorched servers and pending lawsuits. She powered it on. Fan spun. Minimalist Linux distro launched. Untraceable. She connected to a private node, a solar-powered server she buried in an Oregon tool shed during the 2017 audit debacle. It flickered to life. 3:02 a.m. Login attempt from Redline HQ. Username, Lynn, admin. Financials dashboard, denied. 3:03 a.m. Retry with alternate HR superuser account. Denied again. At 3:05 a.m., the system auto-redirected due to multiple failed admin chain logins. That redirect pinged a single endpoint, hers. A red flash blinked on her screen, unauthorized redirection. Gatekeeper protocol. Activated. Marlene smiled. Not smug, not cruel, just quiet satisfaction. The kind you earn after 21 years of being overlooked and 2 weeks of being erased. Another ping. VPN tunnel request. Device registered to internal HR mobile. Flagged. Denied. Reason. Handshake mismatch. MFA invalidation. Then came the ripple. CRM flipped to read only. Internal messaging locked down accounts lacking biometric verification credentials only Marlene could provision. Payroll server began to cycle through authentication failures. At least 6 compliance flags would be triggered before sunrise. Marlene didn't type. She just watched. Hands still, eyes steady. Sometimes you don't need revenge. You just need to be right and patient. Watching a system die without knowing it's already dead, that's what it felt like. Twitching not from sabotage or malware. Marlene hadn't planted a virus. She hadn't tampered with a thing. She'd simply left. And the system, her system, was never built for handoffs. It was built on trust, not documentation. Like a cathedral with no blueprint. It functioned because she knew exactly where each stone fit. Now the architect was gone, and the roof was crumbling. 4:02 a.m. Slack traffic surged. Someone was awake. Probably the junior overnight devs trying to stop the login cascade by rebooting the cloud proxy. Marlene watched it unfold. Loop after loop. System error. Certificate expired. System error. Certificate revoked by root authority. System error. Root at node lock. Local not found. That last one made her laugh short-sharp. The kind of laugh that echoes after a eulogy. By 4:37 a.m., broken integrations started to scream. Every shiny, half-finished platform Avery had rushed into production was now calling APIs that no longer responded. Home had no mailbox. Marlene sipped weak motel tea from a styrofoam cup that smelled like cardboard. She drank it anyway. She could have pulled the plug in one move, one script, one keystroke, but she didn't. Marlene wasn't the villain. She was just the missing foundation. And in her absence, the structure sagged. The lights flickered and the wires sparked, while blame flew like sawdust. She didn't touch the keyboard again. She didn't need to. She watched quiet calm as someone who had once steered the ship now observed it drift without a rudder. By 7:46 a.m., the help desk queue was an inferno. Tier 1 support Tyler 23, who once thought Bash was a social app, was crying into a fast food napkin. Tickets poured in. Payroll field missing. CRM offline. CEO locked out. In Slack. Who deleted my access? Did Marlene do this? Can we undo whatever she did but no one knew? Because Marlene left nothing. No notes, no trail, not out of spite, out of reflex. She'd spent 21 years being the human manual, the final piece of tape holding it together. She was the one who caught what everyone else missed. If she documented it all, it would have taken 500 pages a week and a personal escort for every junior analyst who thought server rack referred to a buffet. So Marlene built it herself, bit by bit, under her own credentials, with her own naming conventions. Scripts labeled "Do Not Touch," final, real, V4 datisH. Cron jobs, scheduled to her birthday. Firewall rules written like riddles. Port blocks even seasoned consultants couldn't trace. Authentication chains tethered to a deprecated handshake protocol. She custom patched in 2014 because no one else would. It wasn't malice. It was muscle memory. A system built around the only person who ever stayed long enough to understand it. And now, they were drowning in it. At 8:09 a.m., Avery sent out her first company-wide email. Subject: Our bright path forward. It was damage control dressed in emojis and corporate spin. We're currently experiencing minor service interruptions. An internal audit has revealed prior lapses in knowledge distribution under legacy leadership. We ask for patience and encourage everyone to stay solution-focused during this exciting pivot. Exciting pivot. Payroll had failed for 218 employees. The CTO was locked out of his own admin panel. One engineering lead posted on Reddit, r sysadmin. I think our whole company was a Marlene dependency, and now Marlene's gone. At 9:02 a.m., her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Text message. It's Lucas. I know I shouldn't reach out. But what did you do, Lucas? Back-end dev. From Nebraska. Smart grounded. He once gave up 3 weekends to help Marlene rebuild a scheduling module when a vendor ghosted. He was the last person to say thank you. Marlene stared at the screen, then typed what they told me to. The typing dots flickered, then nothing. She didn't need a reply. Instead, she turned back to her terminal. The MFA daemon had entered a recursive loop. Database queries were timing out. Someone had bricked a prod instance trying to override a root. A junior dev just rebooted production, thinking it was staging. Marlene watched it unfold, not with glee, but with clarity. She was never loud, never flashy, never praised. But she'd been everything holding it together. She didn't burn the place down. She just built the bones. And now, the bones were howling. Marlene opened the motel mini fridge and pulled out a yogurt she didn't remember buying. Peeled it open. A small act. A cold breakfast while the empire convulsed. And in the quiet, a faint smile touched her lips. Not vengeance. Just clarity. They thought she was replaceable. They were learning otherwise. The first call came at 9:37 a.m., unknown number. Then another this time from Redline HQ. Then a blocked ID vibrating the cheap nightstand like a trapped insect. She didn't pick up. Her tea was steeping, her logs were running, and her silence had become a strategy. By 10:11, they tried voicemail. Marlene. Hi, it's Bryce. Just wanted to, check in. Maybe clear the air. No pressure. Give me a ring. Hope you're doing okay. Bye. No pressure. He sounded like a man calling a plumber the morning of a dinner party after ignoring the leak for 3 years. At 10:42, a junior sysadmin named Benny unraveled the thread. He'd been buried in an old YAML config titled Core Backup, Autumn Osin Legacy, Final. Final? No, really. YAML. Why? Because the official documentation had 3 pages. How to reset your password. How to request PTO. What is a firewall? Benny, powered by fear and discount energy, drinks found a line buried in the override chain. Rootlock.local. Protected. Override. He clicked. Nothing. Encrypted. Sealed. No explanation. Just one unreachable node. He took it to Avery. She read it. Then again. Who the hell is Locke? Silence. One senior dev, rubbing his temples, muttered, That's Marlene. Marlene Locke. Avery's face drained. At 11:17, legal officially panicked. They had no post-termination access clause, no exit audit. Marlene had signed a standard NDA, but she'd also architected the entire infrastructure they were now locked out of. And the contracts, let's just say, no one ever thought she needed managing. Marlene handled things. Now, everything was unhandled. And now, Avery's head was in the guillotine. By noon, Redline's legal team had cobbled together a last-ditch olive branch, an emergency access request, a temporary engagement contract, and a compensation placeholder marked to be discussed. It was flagged urgent. It was also ignored, because Marlene wasn't checking email. She was already logged into her private node, sipping lukewarm tea and watching the logs scroll by. One blink from her terminal, she opened a new file, Redline, triage, proposal, PDF. No letter, no introduction, no corporate fluff, just a 4-page bullet list. Emergency stabilization of infrastructure. $110,000 flat fee. 10-day limited engagement. No NDA revisions. Root privileges granted to consulting node only. One-time credential restoration. All prior scripts and patch authorship remain the intellectual property of Marlene Locke. No contact with Avery Lynn. At the bottom, one line in bold: failure to respond within 60 minutes will be considered a full rejection of terms. She exported it digitally signed and dropped it into a secure compliance folder. A folder still connected to Redline's quarterly audit sync. Thanks to her programming, it would hit their system at exactly 12:45 p.m., which meant they had 50 minutes to sweat. Marlene leaned back in the motel chair, pulled her sleeves over her hands, and closed her eyes. This wasn't about anger. Anger was noisy. This was protocol. This was clarity. This was a woman who knew her worth and sent the invoice accordingly. Outside, a truck rumbled past. Inside, the last domino held its breath. At 1 p.m., sharp, the emergency exec call launched. Avery wore her power blazer, the one with linebacker shoulders, and tried to look composed. It didn't land. Her voice wavered as she opened Zoom. "Thanks for hopping on, everyone." No one smiled. The CFO, Harold Gentry, was muted, video off, breathing heavily, in what sounded like a Chicago hotel. Sales looked half alive. Legal had 2 junior associates on camera, both visibly sweating. Avery read from her script. "We've identified critical gaps in legacy infrastructure and are sourcing third-party consultants with historic context." No one blinked. They all knew who she meant and who held the keys. Then it happened. 1:07 p.m. The client dashboard. Redline's crown jewel, the portal through which millions in services flowed daily, went black. Not an error, not a timeout. Just a silent black void. No spin wheel, no message, nothing. Inside the executive Slack, chaos detonated. Client can't access dashboard Germany. Team lost analytics feed. Where's the financial summary portal? Who took the site offline? Harold's bourbon glass slammed against his desk. "Jesus Christ," he growled. "What the hell is happening?" The head of sales leaned toward his webcam, voice brittle. "Tell me Marlene's involved. Tell me you brought her back." Avery opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Then, from the VP of product, low and bitter, "You fired the wrong person." The call imploded. Shouting. Panic. Breach clause threats. Someone suggested rebooting the whole thing. Legal tried to calm the thread like trying to staple fire to drywall. 1:23 p.m. Marlene's motel burner buzzed again. Voicemail. She didn't answer, but she listened. It was Avery. "Marlene, hi? Look, I know you're probably upset. Please, we're in deep. Nothing's working. Clients are furious. Greg says we'll sign anything. We'll fix this. Just come back." Marlene stared at the water-stained motel wall. A patch above the rattling AC unit looked like a screaming face if you tilted your head just right. She didn't cry. She didn't laugh. She just felt. For the first time since the spiral began. 21 years of code, of cold pizza and hot patches, of 3 a.m. scripts, of being invisible, indispensable, then discarded. And now they remembered her name. But it wasn't vindication. It was vacancy, because no one stood for her when it counted. Not Bryce, not legal, not the board. She mattered only when the lights failed. She gently closed her ThinkPad, set it beside the flickering lamp. She didn't reply. Not yet. 7:59 a.m. Sunlight crept over Redline's rooftop like judgment in a business suit. The lights were on, but inside nothing worked. Not payroll, not procurement. Not even the damn vending machine app Avery launched last quarter. The quarterly compliance deadline ticked down. Final minute. At 8 a.m. Silence, then ping. A crimson alert detonated across the inboxes of Redline's legal, finance, and executive teams. Filing failed. Deadline missed. Penalty incurred. 375,000 Zefitio or attached was a full breakdown from the regulatory compliance system. Every item flagged. Every timestamp marked unauthenticated. Every trace led back to Marlene's old architecture, now dark and dormant. In the elevator, CEO Mick Paxton, dubbed PowerPoint Mussolini, behind closed doors was already foaming. He'd spent the night pacing his luxury condo, dictating rage-fueled memos and threatening to escalate it to D.C. Whatever that meant. When the elevator opened to the exec floor, he stormed through reception, bypassed his assistant, and threw open Avery's door so hard her empathy and action plaque shattered. "What the hell is going on?" he barked. Do you know how many contracts require on-time compliance to stay valid? Do you know what happens when the Federal Oversight Board sees us fail 2 quarters in a row? Avery stood pale and rigid. Her usually perfect curls were tied back in a panic bun. Her blazer looked slept in. Mascara streaked downward. "I've been coordinating with legal," she stammered. "We're drafting slam." Mick's hands hit her desk. "Who is Locke?" She blinked. What he jabbed at the IT status report. Routalock.local. Protected override. Circled. Reviewed by 5 different directors. Who the hell is Locke? Her voice cracked. She was IT. The words hit like a blade. Mick stared, then said flatly, "Get her back or clear your desk." Downstairs, legal finally received the message they'd been refreshing for. Subject engagement terms. Marlene Locke sent, via her counsel from a secure Proton Mail address. The email was simple, cold. Our client is open to a limited engagement with Redline Systems, pending acceptance of previously submitted terms. Full payment in advance. Remote work only. No access or contact by Avery Lynn. Legal waives all future IP claims on proprietary scripts authored by Marlene Locke. Attach the same PDF proposal as yesterday. No discount, no greeting, no mercy. Just business. The kind you offer when the begging begins. At 8:37 a.m., the CFO approved the wire. No negotiation, no delay. By 8:42, $110,000 hit Marlene's designated holding account. And still, she waited. She finished her tea, watched a plastic bag tumble across the motel parking lot in slow, lopsided pirouettes. Caught on wind circling a dented F-150 like it was trying to escape. 8:50 a.m. She opened the ThinkPad, logged in, and for the first time in 3 days, Redline's pulse returned faint, then stable. But she didn't say a word. She didn't need to. They'd already screamed enough through voicemails, Slack meltdowns, and 7-figure losses. Now, she held the silence, and the silence roared. At 10:00 a.m., Marlene walked through Redline's front doors. No badge, no reception check-in. Darnell, the security guard, just stepped aside. About time, he muttered. She wore black, tailored blazer, no accessories, no frills. Her gray-streaked hair was tied back like someone prepared for litigation, not forgiveness. No laptop bag, just a slim metal case, and 21 years of restrained thunder beneath her skin. She didn't glance at her old desk. That space had been picked apart the day after her exit. Some junior analyst probably claimed her chair and slapped a smartwatch charger on it. She went straight to the boardroom. Legal was already seated. 3 suits on one side. 1 empty chair. No Avery in sight. Andrea Voss, chief legal officer, rose as Marlene entered. "Ms. Locke." Marlene nodded. Sat. Unlatched the case. Inside her root authenticator, still wrapped in anti-static plastic, like a relic from a war they pretended never happened. Andrea slid over the contract pre-signed by CEO, CFO, and board. A notary sat like a priest at a corporate confession. Marlene signed. 1 stroke, no hesitation. Then she inserted the drive. Lights flickered. System stirred. Payroll synced. CRM unlocked. Compliance filed 32 seconds under deadline. A junior dev clapped. Marlene stood. No selfies. No speeches. And at the hallway's end, Avery waited pale and still. Marlene passed her slow. Then, without turning, "Next time, don't mistake silence for weakness," and walked. No music, no calls, just the hum of quiet justice. If you've made it this far, thank you for watching what they never saw in me until it was too late. I wasn't loud. I didn't fight for attention. I just made sure things worked. If you've ever been overlooked, underestimated, or called too quiet to lead this story, is for you. Drop a comment below. Tell me what they missed when they dismissed you. I'll be reading everyone. And if you're still holding it together in silence, don't wait for the collapse to prove your value. Speak up, stand firm, and never confuse humility with invisibility. We deserve better.